G'day, before we start today's tour, I got to thank you all for the 13,000 views we got on the bike tour. Really means a lot to us, so make sure you like and subscribe. Every viewer counts. I didn't think that many people would be interested in old school choppers, so today we're going to do some old school hot rods. Your support really helps. You know, we sold a bunch of merch off the website. My website's up on the screen sooner or later when my cameraman decides to put it up, but it really means a lot. We get no money from YouTube for this, and just buying a bit of merch helps us keep this thing going. So if you like what you see, buy a bit of merch, like and subscribe. So you've seen the 32. That's my daily driver. Well, we're going to swap daily drivers this week. I've had a bunch of airbrush stuff in the shed. I couldn't move for it. I've finally got a fair bit of it out, so now I've made room. And we'll get this little baby out, give her a good clean. Hasn't been driven for months, and I'll use this for a daily driver for a while. So she's a little bit dusty, a couple of cobwebs even. So I'm going to give it a wash because my detailer has now turned into my cameraman. So we're going to get it all cleaned up. I'll take it for a burn, make sure it's all running good, check all the fluids, and I'll take her to work. Better take the big screen TV out. I don't want it getting wet. One of the great joys of owning a few cars is you get to clean them, which I'm not crazy about. I love building them, but boy, you get them nice and clean, the next day they're dirty again. But it is nice going out in a nice clean car. This car here is probably, I started building it in about 2001. I stopped for a little while because I got the idea I was going to build a bubble top, you know, a tribute to Big Daddy Ed Roth, who did a lot of these cars in fiberglass. And I've never been a great fan of fiberglass. I love metalworking, so this whole body is actually sheet metal. I've used the Pullmax machine that you would have seen me doing the louvers on. All this doming here is all done on the Pullmax. These headlights. So I actually drew the car up on the computer, which is something I'd never done before, and I dialed in all the correct measurements and wheel sizes, so I got a pretty good basic layout of what the car was going to look like just on the computer screen. Very basic, but I did use those measurements when I was building it. So I got a bunch of 1/2-inch steel tubing. Little battle scar there, must have been a rock. I started off with 1/2-inch tubing. I laid all the frame out over the chassis, which was already done like a T-bucket chassis, so I knew I'd be able to get it registered reasonably easy under the hot rod rego. And I did the 1/2-inch tube framework, and I basically shaped pieces of metal and welded them over the top. A lot of the frame I did cut out when I was finished because I wanted to keep it pretty lightweight. This whole car lifts up from the front like a drag, like a funny car. So when I work on the engine, we just lift it up, put a couple of sticks under there, you get the engine, transmission, everything's really easy to work on when the body's up in the air like that. Now after I built the body, I got it ready for paint. I had to use not much body filler on the whole car, just on the joins, hardly any on the big sheet panels, mainly just over the welds where the joins were. So there wasn't much body filling involved at all. The first thing I did was paint it in the gold metal flake. It's a spray chief colour, and it's like a base coat, or you can add hardener to it. So very I wasn't sure how good the paint was, but I'll tell you, it's been 20 something years. There's not a crack. Now there's a few cracks from body movement, but nothing in the big areas of metal flake. And I put it through a lot of extreme weather, I think. And after I got the body made and based up, I started fitting it all up to make sure everything had fit before I did too much paint work. The bubbles, we made a timber frame with the shape of the bubble we needed. I think from memory I had to make them 400 high, so it was clamped into a wooden frame, and the perspex was heated up, and we simply applied air to it until it reached the height we needed. So it was one half of a bubble, and then let it cool. We cut them up. I cut these in half. Originally I had the bubble right over with just a couple of inches in between, so it did look like complete bubbles. But for Rego I had to turn them into wind deflectors, so they couldn't be over my head, otherwise I would have to put windscreen wipers. And imagine making a set of windscreen wipers that would work on a curved bubble. I'd like to see that. And I've got all them working on air. And back in the late 90s, the airbag thing was just coming in. There wasn't too many cars around with airbags, but there's a bit of controversy over them. But I ended up putting some airbags in, and you have to do all kinds of safety measures with airbags. You just can't whack them in case they pop and your body chassis hits the ground. It's pretty scary stuff. Going great. Brakes are good, staying nice and cool. Brakes are good. Just got to top up the fuel. This has got a Cadillac engine in it. It's got a mad cam in it. I swapped out the engine for, I don't know, some pinstriping, some airbrushing or something. But when it was in pieces, when Sean Collette and I put it together, he said this cam is wild, do you still want to run it? Everything was set up, so we put the big cam in it. You can hear how big a cam it is. So it's got the Cadillac engine, turbo 400 transmission. It's only got an 8-inch diff because I figure this car's very light. Like 2 people can lift the body, 2 people can lift the chassis. So apart from the engine and box, there's not much weight there at all in body and chassis work. So front end wise, we've got a 34 front axle, Holden disc brakes, Cadillac brake lights and indicators. We've got these spun up so they look like little rockets, something a bit futuristic. The headlights are actually chopper headlights. I've got the same one on my knucklehead and on my shovel head, I think. I've just made these so they clip in. Even when I was building the car, I wasn't sure what engine to run, and then I noticed Ed Roth would love the Cadillacs. And I looked over in the corner, I had the Cadillac engine sitting there in pieces, so that's why she got a Cadillac engine. And then I found out it was a favourite engine of my good friend Gene Winfield's too. I needed a few parts, like a front pulley, a few pieces like that. I said to Gene, so I was staying at his place one time, I said, I need some parts for my caddy motor for the bubble top. He says, come out the back. And he pulled up a tarp. He must have had a dozen Cadillac engines sitting there, and he said, help yourself. It was great. So this car's had a number of personalities transported in it. My brother James Hatfield, who's in the same car club as me, lead singer from Metallica, he came over one time on tour, so him and I went for a spin through the valley. So I wasn't sure whether people were looking at the car or looking at him, but I don't know, he's more scared or impressed, but we took him for a burn. Wrong side of the road, steering wheel on the wrong side for him. He loved it.
Yep.
So Ed Roth built a number of bubble top cars. They weren't all bubble tops, but we built some wild. So we built some wild choppers too, trikes. I only got to meet him a couple of times. I met him in the early 80s when I was really young. He was airbrushing t-shirts at a car show. And then I was fortunate enough to go to his house a few years later and meet him and have a sit down chat. And he was talking about how everyone should have a computer and how computers were the new thing. And back then I thought, I'm never going to have to drive a computer. But sure enough, doing the magazine editing with Live to Ride and Australian Tattoo, I ended up sitting in front of a computer for a few hours a week. Now, I also became good friends with his son, Dennis. And Dennis came out here as a guest of our car club. And he came to Cooley Rocks, and I said, let's take the bubble top down. So we're going down the highway, and the first thing that happened was the vacuum line for the transmission came off. So while I'm fixing that, he's walking around polishing the car. And then we got close to the show and we ran out of fuel. I couldn't believe it. I organised some fuel and I apologised to him. I said, man, I can't believe we're only travelling like 100 miles and we had to stop twice. And he said, this used to happen to me and Dad all the time. And he stood there polishing the car, not stressed at all. I felt a little embarrassed, but he reassured me it was cool. But he told me the story about him and his dad going away in one of the cars, and they broke down on the side of the road out in the middle of the desert. And his dad told they needed a few nuts and bolts or parts to get it going again. So he said to his son, you walk that way for a quarter mile, I walk this way for a quarter mile, pick up whatever you see, cross the road and walk back on the other side and pick up whatever you see. He said they went quarter of a mile each way, quarter mile back, and he said by the time they got back they had enough parts to build a whole car. He had a lot of good stories about him and his dad and the car scene in general in America back in the early days. He's a great guy. Hope you're watching, Dennis. Gene has also visited here. We chopped a Mercury together and he's been here on a couple of trips, and it's good to catch up with him here in Australia. He really loves the scene here. He likes all the different cars. He loves the EH steering wheels. He loves the different headlight surrounds you get, like the EH ones for Frenching. Hey, as well as Big Daddy Ed Roth, I had some other people who have inspired me in my life. Probably one of the biggest is Gene Winfield. Without you, I wouldn't have the drive to do the stuff I do. Gene's a great car builder, a very famous guy in his own right. Love you, mate. Okay, well that's a wrap. If you've got any questions you want to ask me about this car, leave them in the comments and let me know what you want to see next time. I've got lots of stuff to show. You know, maybe we do some airbrushing, paint. We'll go down. We've got to do heaps of work on the Terraplane yet. So let me know what you like and we'll try and include them in the videos. Don't forget, like and subscribe, and don't forget, buy a t-shirt. It helps us keep us going doing these shows. We get nothing off YouTube or the mad computer world up there. Take care.